Today, I'm going to talk about 3 common portrait photography mistakes that I see in photos posted online every day. Now, obviously, everything in photography can be subjective, so these mistakes might not be things that you agree with, and that is fine. But let's run through them, discuss them, and I'll share some helpful tips. There will also be a bonus tip at the end. I'm going to offer you some advice on how to approach models or everyday people, specifically females, to shoot with. So if that's something that you struggle with or you're not sure how to do, stick around and I can help. I see so many portraits posted online where the model is actually in focus, but there is motion blur. This is obviously down to shutter speed, and sometimes these things can get confused, especially if you're new to photography. It's definitely something that tripped me up in the beginning. Using a shutter speed of 1/60th or 1/25th just isn't fast enough sometimes to freeze even just simple motion of turning your head or something small your model might be doing. I think this is something that sports and wildlife photographers are much more attuned to, obviously because their subjects are things that are moving quickly. But when we do portrait shots, we kind of maybe forget about that piece of the equation. Unless there is absolutely no way around it when you are doing your shoot, I think keeping your shutter speed at 250 is going to give you a much better chance of freezing that action, or even 500 to be completely safe. Obviously, every photo shoot is going to be different, especially when there is someone else involved. And this is what makes portrait photography so fun and amazing, but also a more difficult genre to get right. So in the case that you're working with a very experienced model who can confidently hold a pose and work with you a lot more effectively, you could definitely get away with those slower shutter speeds. But if the ISO and the lighting allows, I would just bump it up so that you're sure and you don't miss out on shots that would have otherwise been really good. Before we hit record on this video, Lux and I did a little experiment to show this because I think it's always better to show than just explain. And you can see here, we just did a little test where I moved my head back and forth, which is something that your model will, likely do during the shoot. And if you want to capture candid, natural photos, you want to be able to let them move freely and not be too kind of stiff and posed. So as you can see here from the results of that little pre-recording experiment, you can see from like 1/60th up to 250, there's some motion blur. 250 is where we see it really being frozen and above. So just keep that in mind. This could just be a simple, handy tip to make you feel more confident on a shoot. And I think when you're working with people as well, you don't want to be too bogged down with all of your settings and your gear. You really want to be there with the person, which is something we're going to touch on later in the video. So having that set at something that you don't need to think about and you know is going to cover it is going to be so good for you. Every day online, I see so many beautiful portraits that are technically proficient and well executed in terms of the technicalities, but they just lack context and story and therefore connection. To me, the most alluring thing about portrait photography or working with other people is the fact that you have this alive, moving subject with a personality that you can inject into the work. Where I think portraits really shine, or sets of photos that are styled, including people, is when the photographer can really access that person's personality, their interests, their emotions, and convey that through the photo. So placing less importance on the technical side of things and opting to make context and story really the forefront of the portrait session. If I had a couple of pieces of advice to give people, especially men who are photographing women, it would be the following. Invite your subject to be a part of the process before you even get started shooting. If you think about when you ask someone to do a photo shoot, there might be someone who's a friend. There could be an amateur model. They might be a professional. It doesn't really matter. But you are going to be getting everything ready. You're getting all your gear ready. You're deciding, where the shoot's going to be. And there's a lot of pre-production that goes into it. Consider having your model be a part of this instead of just inviting them along to be this passive kind of object in it all. Getting input from them on things like styling, location, props, and what they hope for the shoot. Is there something that they can give you that's a reference that might spark some inspiration? Have they seen a location that they would love to be shot in? Do they have something about themselves that they particularly like or even don't like that's going to help you craft a better shoot and tell a better story of who they are as an overall person. So, really looking at someone holistically, not just the aesthetics of them, and kind of get their interests involved and weave them throughout the storyline in this photo shoot. Don't just simply take someone to a park and put them in front of a bunch of nice flowers or bushes and then just take like 20 to 30 photos of them in very similar poses in front of those things. Yes, it's beautiful, and I'm all for just a really nice portrait with bokeh that's beautiful. That's great sometimes, but we need to push ourselves a little bit further outside of that if we want to create portrait photography that is impactful, interesting, is going to grab attention. If you're someone who's trying to book work, this is really important. But beyond that, it's just so nice to do someone justice and tell their story through a photograph. Oh, it's like so needed to get that off my Stop taking women to parks. Another handy tip here are props. So I've talked about this before in a Substack newsletter, and I think it's worth repeating that props can be really helpful to help you to tell a story. And they can also double as something that the model can do with their hands, especially if they're nervous, if you're working with someone who's never posed before, which can be really fun and interesting. Give them something to do with their hands, something to interact with. You know, it could be a camera, it could be a book, it could be a drink, you know, it could be anything that's going to help to match the aesthetic, tell the story, and make it more engaging for the viewer, but also make it easier for the model because they'll kind of feel like that's their like security blanket, you know. I have been in front of the camera a lot and I still get nervous, and I am always so pleased to have a prop or something to do because as soon as the camera comes up, your hands just feel like these awkward things that you don't know what to do with. I think it can be really helpful to go back over famous shoots of people and see how they were brought together. You know, think about Vanity Fair shoots and how they tell stories of the celebrity and the person. It normally ties into like what they had going on at the moment or, you know, the movie they were doing, all of those kinds of things. And think about how you can create those like little storyboards for the shoots that you do. As a photographer, I deliver a lot of images and videos to clients and collaborators, and I've never been overly happy with the usual file storage and delivery systems. They can be clunky and don't present well, and it can get messy going back and forth via email, the client trying to tell me what they like and don't like and proof the work. So I recently said goodbye Google Drive and hello PicDrop. PicDrop is an image delivery platform that is made for photographers by photographers. So they really know what goes into the process of delivering images to clients. They've considered all of this and they've made it really easy, seamless, and slick. There are over 180,000 creatives using PicDrop to deliver and proof images effortlessly. So it really is the go-to time-saving tool for photographers working with others to bring exciting concepts to life. I'm finding it's looking so much more professional to host all of my images there and send a link out to a client to view it, as opposed to other things that I was using before that just lacked that little professional touch that I really needed as I'm growing my business. PicDrop would also be a fantastic way to work with galleries or publishers on photo books, hosting things like portfolio reviews, basically anything where you need to be sharing videos and photos and then allowing the other person to mark them up and make comments, choose photos, and just collaborate on the final product. If you are looking for a software solution designed specifically for photographers, then PicDrop is the one for you. So try it out for free and experience the difference for yourself. Just click the link in my description to redeem your 2 free months of PicDrop, or go to www.picdrop.com/go/Lucy Lumen. The next thing I want to talk about is connection between model and photographer. And of course, this isn't always possible because we might be in a situation where we simply don't have much time. We don't know the person very well. But something I have noticed is that mirrorless cameras, modern mirrorless cameras, have a lot to answer for. I know they do have an EVF, but most of the time people are using the LCD screen on the back. And I see this a lot. There's a location near us that we go to shoot, and there's a lot of weddings and family photography happening there. And I often see photographers there taking photos, and these are pretty like special, intimate kind of moments, and they're blasting away with the camera held down here at like hip height, which feels like kind of an awkward angle for people. And there's no connection. There's like this kind of angular disconnect because they're looking down there shooting and the model is then maybe not sure like where they're supposed to look. Whereas if you have something, and you look through the viewfinder, you've normally got one eye still on your subject at the level of them actually looking at you. And, you can then pop out and be like, oh, you look great or whatever, and keep going. And you just get that true connection. And I think that's something that maybe we haven't really thought about. It might be a little bit more difficult or slower, but I think it's definitely worth paying attention to and taking into account next time you do a portrait shoot. Another point about looking through the viewfinder is you'll notice the subtleties in the expression a lot more than you will if you're using an LCD screen and it's all kind of like big and open. You're also isolating everything, which I think is probably, was the point in the first place. I think that's kind of like how it's meant to be. And you're closing off and just focusing on your model, on your subject, and blocking everything else out. And I really think we do need to like zone in and lock in with people when we want to take really great portraits. So beyond the technical aspect, it really is all about trying to build a rapport with someone. And this could be in a very short space of time. It's someone you don't know. I find a lot of photographers can be quite introverted as well. So this might be difficult, but some tips here would be to start a conversation. And I think keeping that conversation going throughout the shoot is really important. I've been on shoots before where there's a little bit of convo or a coffee beforehand, and then we get into shooting and it all feels like super serious or dry or just awkward. And I'd really appreciate it if there was just like a few bones thrown my way to talk about things while you've got all these people looking at you or you don't know someone that well who's photographing you. So finding some kind of commonality, it could just be like, where do you live or something to do with the weather. It can be literally anything because the other person is anxious and they're probably just hoping that you're going to bring something up so that you guys can break the ice, talk a little bit. If you can kind of disarm someone, you're going to get way better photos. So just take the time to do this and don't rush the photo shoot along in lieu of the conversation, and try and find something that you can connect with or be funny. You might not be the funniest person ever, but making someone laugh, they're probably going to laugh anyway because they're just anxious. I know I do that when I'm anxious. So just break the ice and try and bring everything down to a level that feels more comfortable. A great example of connection in photography is this book by Chris Stein, who was the guitarist in Blondie, the group, which I'm sure you all know. Debbie Harry is extremely photogenic. I don't think you could take a bad photo of Debbie Harry, but Chris Stein and her were together for nearly the whole time Blondie existed, and he took photos of her religiously on tour and in intimate moments, all sorts of things. And this book kind of compiles his photography of the 70s punk scene, but there are so many amazing photos of Debbie Harry of Blondie, and you can really see that she's looking at him and that they were together. Like the connection comes through in the photography. And obviously we can't have these decade-long iconic relationships with every single person we shoot, but using this as your bar and thinking about how you can create a rapport with someone and maybe even photographing them, religiously, the same way directors like Wes Anderson or, Jim Jarmusch work with the same actors. They start to build up a rapport with them and it just creates this different result. So go back to those people, do shoots again with them and have them as like your, regular people that you work with. Onto our bonus tip as promised. So I get questions a lot and it's a lot easier for me to answer them in a video like this so more people can hear. But a lot of people ask me, Lucy, how do I approach people if I want to do shoots? So there's a few different ways that you could do this. And obviously it's going to differ depending on who you're asking and what kind of shoot you're doing and how experienced you are as a photographer, all these types of things. But to generally answer the question, I think there's sort of two ways you can do this. You can do a call out online And again, this is going to depend on, I guess, how much reach you get online or, who you have access to. But that's a good way of letting people come to you. It doesn't, however, allow you to choose who you want to shoot if you have a specific type of person or aesthetic in mind. So I would also opt for asking people directly. I think this is a great thing to do. It just has to be done in the right way. I know that nowadays for men, it can be quite hard to approach a woman and ask her to take her photo. There's a lot of stigma attached to that, but it can definitely still be done. It just has to be done in a polite way. I have a couple of tips here written down that will help. And if you follow these, I'm sure there'll be no offense and everything will be totally fine. The worst that they're going to say is no. So reaching out, whether that's via email or DM to this person, and first of all, being polite, introducing yourself and making sure they know who you are, what you do, some credibility, which is where something like a website, or if you have all your photos on PicDrop, you could just send them a link, something that can vouch for you as, you're just not some weird dude with a camera who wants to take photos of a girl. You're someone who is a passionate portrait photographer, and these are the people that you have photographed before, and here are the albums, and they can see your work. They can see, oh, he's really serious, or I love this. I want to be photographed by him. Another great thing to include in the initial ask is why you want to shoot this particular person. Again, being respectful. I know that it's really nice to, shoot beautiful people or whatever, but try and come up with something that, really distills why you want to work with them. So have you already seen them in shoots and you really like the way they pose or, move? Is it an idea that you have in your head that's from a movie and they perfectly reflect this? So try and give them the why behind the shoot and why you particularly are reaching out to them whilst being respectful. Another great thing to include in the initial ask is the terms. So is this just time for prints? People call this TFP. Are you a little bit more established? Do you have a budget if you're working with a brand or something like that? What is it that you can offer and bring to the table? Let them know what the terms and conditions are straight away so they don't feel uncomfortable and have to ask, or there's no miscommunication. If you are just starting out, you likely don't have the money. So offering people edited, really beautiful photos of themselves, a lot of people will be very happy with that. So make that very clear that that's what you have on offer. You are going to provide them with this set of images that they are then free to use however they wish. Also consider the location that you choose and how comfortable that's going to make your model. And this is something that might come a little bit later when you start going back and forth organizing the shoot. Just consider that, think about how you would feel, put yourself in their shoes. I have done shoots before with people and there's been other people on set because it's been a male photographer. There's been things to sign, and I've always found it really, really helpful if there's another woman there and there's, someone else. You're not on your own. So just consider that, because sometimes I think men maybe don't initially think of that. So I'm hoping that this is going to help, because I know there are a lot of men watching this channel, help you to come to a woman and be like, hey, I'd love to do a shoot, create this really cool, creative thing with you, and do it in a way that lowers your anxiety and respects them, and then also ends up in an awesome shoot and experience for both of you. So like I said, all of these things are subjective, but these are the things that I see all the time, and I wanted to share them in today's video because if you are interested in portrait photography, then these will hopefully be helpful things that will boost your hit rate, make the experience more enjoyable, and result in interesting portrait photos. Thank you so much to PicDrop for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget to check them out in the description and get 2 months free of PicDrop and level up your professionalism as a photographer. And thank you so much to you guys for watching.